What happens when a man who's built his life on grit, truth, and backbone walks into the most combative talk show in America and refuses to play by their rules? When Sam Elliott stepped onto The View, it was supposed to be a harmless morning chat about his new film. But within minutes, the studio turned into a battlefield. Joy Behar came loaded with barbs, ready to make him the villain. Sam, calm as ever, came armed with nothing but honesty, and that was enough to set off an explosion. What followed wasn't a debate, it was a reckoning. A brutal, unfiltered clash between old-school integrity and modern outrage. And by the end of it, one of them would walk away shattered. Trust me, this talk show won't disappoint you. It'll be worth every second of your time. Sam Elliott walked onto the View set like a man walking into a bar he didn't ask to be in. Calm, measured. The crowd clapped, but he didn't smile much, just tipped his head. Across the table, Joy Behar watched him carefully, like she was already sizing him up. She gave that polite smile she's famous for. Whoopi started the show, doing her usual warm welcome, but even she could feel the air shift. The conversation started soft, the usual Hollywood chatter, but it didn't stay that way for long. Joy didn't waste time. "Let's skip the small talk," she said, leaning in. "Do you think Hollywood's changing because it needs to, or because men like you are being dragged along by the belt buckle?" The corners of Sam's mouth twitched. Not quite a smile. "Depends who's doing the dragging, ma'am. The artists or the activists." The room tightened. Joy's eyebrows lifted. Joy went for his weak point. "You've made a career growling through cowboy myths and truck commercials. Isn't your definition of good storytelling just stories where you're the guy with the hat?" Sam didn't blink. "I like hats fine, but I like scripts with a spine better." Joy's smile thinned. "Right. A spine that looks like the 1980s with better lighting." Sam shrugged. "A spine that looks like honesty. Lighting optional." She poked again, sharper. "When's the last time you picked a project that didn't flatter your brand? Or do you just slap the mustache on it and call it depth?" Sam let the jab land, then set it down. "The mustache doesn't do the acting," he said evenly, "and brand doesn't keep a set quiet. Respect does." Joy cocked her head. Respect? Or fear of criticizing a man who's been grandfathered into legend status? Sam's eyes didn't move. "I've got grandkids, ma'am. I don't need to be grandfathered into anything." Whoopi cleared her throat, tried to ease the throttle. "Let's talk craft." Joy cut across her, never taking her eyes off Sam. "Craft is nice, but power is nicer. How much of your craft is just comfort for people who don't want to see the world change?" Sam leaned forward a hair. "Change is fine. Bad writing isn't. If your message needs training wheels, it's not a motorcycle. It's a scooter with a press release." Joy snorted. "Easy to say when you've always had the keys." Sam's reply was sandpaper soft. "Keys don't start a dead engine." She pivoted to the personal. "Tell me, Sam, off camera, do you lecture dinner guests too, or just the country? Do you correct the waiter if the menu's too political?" He gave a half smile. "I tip well and eat my steak. And I don't confuse seasoning with substance," Joy fired back. "Cute line. Did your publicist write it, or was it born right there under the Stetson?" Sam, "No publicist wrote my mouth. And I wear a hat when there's sun, not when there's a camera." She tried a different angle. "You've spent decades as the stoic man of few words." "Funny how many words you suddenly have about who gets to tell stories." Sam's voice dropped. "I don't care who tells them. I care how they're told. If the plot is a sermon and the character's a hashtag, you didn't write a movie. You printed a pamphlet." Joy set her elbows on the table. Translation: you miss the days when the how was always defined by guys who look like you. Sam. Translation: you can put anyone in the saddle, but the horse still needs to run. Joy's tone turned sly. "You've been married to the same image for 50 years. Gravel voice, righteous squint. I speak for the quiet people. Maybe the quiet people need new spokesmen." Sam's mouth finally curved. "The quiet people don't need spokesmen. They need quiet long enough to watch something honest." She laughed once, sharp. "Honest like what?" Another grizzled loner who fixes the town with a jawline? Sam, honest like a scene that doesn't stop mid-stride to look into the lens and beg for applause? Whoopi tried again. Let's bring it back to the new film. Joy waved it off, still locked on Sam. Fine, your honesty. When a woman director makes a risk and misses, do you call it honest or do you call it quota cinema with a straight face? Sam met the bait without blinking. I call a miss and a hit a hit. Same standard, same room, same notes. I don't change the ruler depending on who's standing there. Joy arched a brow. Convenient. You get to be the ruler and hold the ruler, Sam. No, audiences do. They always did. The smartest people in this business don't work on sets. They buy tickets. She went for the quick cut. You rail against optics from the safety of a legacy career. If the new guard were as precious about comfort as you, we'd still be handing out Oscars for tumbleweeds. Sam's answer came dry as dust. Ma'am, I've shot in heat that melts shoe glue. Comfort's not my problem. Pretending discomfort is courage, that's your business, not mine. Joy smiled without warmth. And pretending tradition is truth, that's yours. Sam nodded once. Sometimes it is. She leaned closer, dropping her voice. You know what I think? I think you're tired of not being the moral center anymore. You want to be the man who walks in, says the simple, rugged thing, and everyone claps. Sam's reply was a burr. No, ma'am. I want the writing to be the center. If the words can't carry the weight, don't blame the man who won't pretend they do. Whoopi raised a hand. All right. But Joy pressed one more needle. Last question. If Hollywood keeps moving this way, do you adapt or do you retire into legend and let the rest of us make the messy modern stuff? Sam's eyes held hers. I work. Same as always. And I tell the truth as I see it. If that's messy, then maybe the mess isn't the truth. It's the selling of it. Joy gave a small, satisfied nod, like she'd found the vein. So, forced change or real change? Sam didn't look away. Artists or activists, he repeated softly. If it's the first, I'm listening. If it's the second, I'm not kneeling. The line hung there, heavy as a gavel. Joy Behar leaned back in her chair, lips curling just slightly, and said, So, in that interview, you talked about politically convenient storytelling. I've been dying to ask. Convenient for who exactly? People tired of only seeing cowboys who look like you? Sam didn't blink. He leaned forward, elbows on the table, voice low but sharp enough to cut through glass. Convenient, he said, for anyone who hides weak writing behind noble slogans. The air snapped. A few people in the audience gasped. One even laughed nervously. Joy's smile hardened into something closer to a sneer. That's funny, she said. Coming from a guy who's been cashing checks off the same Western cliches for 40 years. You're basically a walking Marlboro ad with dialogue. Sam smiled faintly, the kind of smile that says, nice try. And yet here we are, he said, still talking about me. Must have done something right. Joy crossed her arms. Sure, you did it the old way, the safe way, where the only diversity was in your hat collection. Sam didn't flinch. He leaned back, slow and deliberate. I've been in this town long enough to see 100 fake revolutions, Joy. You don't fix bias by hiring buzzwords. You fix it by hiring talent and letting them tell the truth without a committee rewriting it to death. Sonny Hostin shifted uncomfortably, glancing at Ana Navarro. Joy caught it and pounced. You know, you sound like every guy who thinks merit is just code for people who agree with me. Sam's eyes flickered. And you sound like every host who confuses volume with virtue? That line hit hard. The audience murmured again. Joy leaned forward, voice rising. You really think you're the gatekeeper of truth, don't you? Sitting on your porch of authenticity, deciding what's real and what's woke, Sam met her glare head on. No, ma'am. I just know the difference between art and activism, and I can tell which one's selling better these days. Joy laughed, sharp and hollow. You're scared, Sam. Admit it. The spotlight's shifting, and you don't know how to live without it. Sam's expression didn't move. I've been out of the spotlight more times than you've been in it, he said evenly. But I don't chase relevance, Joy. I let the work speak. You might try that sometime. That one landed deep. Joy's smirk vanished for just a second before she covered it with a scoff. You call that work? Grumbling your way through another role about real men while the rest of the world evolves? Sam chuckled once. Quiet, deadly. Better to play a real man than pretend to be one on TV. Whoopi shot him a look that said tone it down. But Sam didn't care. The temperature had changed. This wasn't an interview anymore. It was a duel dressed as morning television. Anna whispered something to Sonny, who nodded slightly. Joy caught it and snapped, "Don't whisper like you're at church. Say it, or are we all just here to watch Grandpa America have a meltdown?" Sam leaned forward again, his tone flat but full of heat. Keep swinging, Joy. You'll hit truth eventually, though I doubt you'll recognize it when you do. Joy leaned in, her patience long gone. Maybe you're just uncomfortable not being the hero anymore, she said, her tone dripping with mock sympathy. Hollywood isn't your movie set, Sam. Not everyone needs a grizzled cowboy to ride in and save the day. Sam's eyes narrowed. Maybe, he said slowly, you're addicted to villains, because without them, your outrage doesn't have a job. The room erupted. Gasps, nervous laughter, and a few claps from somewhere in the back. Joy slammed her cue cards on the desk so hard the microphones popped. You think you're clever, huh? She snapped. You sit there with that folksy charm pretending you're above it all, but the truth is you can't stand that the world moved on without asking your permission. Sam didn't blink. The world didn't move on, he said calmly. It just started shouting louder. Big difference. Whoopi raised a hand. All right, let's take a... Joy cut her off. No, let's not. Let's finally say it. Sam, you sound like every man who's mad his audience doesn't automatically agree with him anymore. You built a career on being the strong, silent type. But now people are calling you out, and suddenly it's propaganda? Sam's hand twitched, his jaw tightening. You know what your problem is, Joy, he said, pointing straight at her. You've turned moral conviction into performance art. Joy's eyes flashed. And you've turned privilege into philosophy. He leaned forward, voice low and dangerous. Better philosophy than propaganda. That landed like a gunshot. Whoopi's voice rose, pleading, all right, enough. We're not... But no one listened. Joy was standing now, her red cue cards crumpled in her fist. You sit up here pretending you're defending art, she said, but really you're defending comfort. Your own. The same comfort that's kept real stories off the screen for decades. Sam rose too, slow, deliberate. The tension in the studio was electric. You want to talk about comfort, he said. You sit in this chair 5 days a week lecturing people for sport. You're not chasing truth, Joy. You're chasing applause. Applause? She shot back, voice cracking slightly. You think I do this for applause? You think I enjoy dealing with people like you? Sam's voice dropped to a growl. You enjoy outrage, Joy. You feed on it. Because if people ever stopped fighting, you'd have nothing left to talk about. The crowd murmured again, louder this time, like they could feel something historic happening. Whoopi stood, trying one last time to take control, but even she couldn't cut through it. Sam's final line came quiet, steady, and cold. You asked why I'm not the hero anymore? Because these days, truth doesn't get applause. It gets shouted down. The smoke from their last exchange hadn't cleared when both of them tried pretending it had. The voices dropped, but the eyes stayed locked. Joy straightened her papers, tone dripping with restraint. You're defending an industry that silenced people like me for decades, Sam. Don't forget that Sam nodded once, slow. And now, he said, you're silencing anyone who remembers how to disagree. Joy let out a laugh, sharp, brittle, almost musical. You think disagreement is oppression? He didn't hesitate. No, he said, but watching people call censorship a virtue, that's oppression with makeup. The audience gasped. Even Ana Navarro muttered, oh, damn, under her breath. Joy's smile froze for half a second before she turned it back into a smirk. You always did know how to make a soundbite, Sam. But let's see if you can back it up. She leaned forward, eyes narrowing. Name one movie, just one, that you think checked boxes instead of telling real stories. Sam's gaze didn't waver. I won't throw names, he said, but I'll say this. If your story needs a checklist before it needs a heartbeat, it's not art. Joy's lips tightened. That's not courage, Sam, she said. That's cowardice dressed as critique. The room fell still again. Everyone knew what was happening. Joy was baiting him, trying to push him into saying something she could twist. But Sam had been in too many showdowns to take that step without meaning it. He sat back, crossed his arms. Cowardice is pretending honesty's a threat just because it doesn't flatter your beliefs. Whoopi finally stepped in, her voice smooth and measured, trying to cool the heat. All right, folks. Let's all take a breath. We can talk about representation without throwing punches. For about 30 seconds, it almost felt normal again. They exchanged polite smiles. Sam said something thoughtful about storytelling, needing to include everyone, but not lose its soul. Joy nodded, or at least pretended to. Then, as always, she couldn't resist. You talk, she said, her tone sugar-sweet, like someone whose era is over. A man who just can't stand that the sheriff's badge doesn't belong to him anymore. Sam looked straight at her, not a muscle moving. Ma'am, he said, his voice slow, gravel thick. I never needed a badge. I had a backbone. The audience erupted. Applause, gas, laughter, all at once. Even Whoopi froze halfway through a word. Joy gave a tight, forced laugh, her hands trembling just enough to give her away. Well, she said, congratulations. You've still got one. Sam leaned back in his chair, calm as a man who just walked out of a fire he didn't start, but finished. Joy's chair scraped hard against the floor as she stood, her voice slicing through the noise. You think you're brave for saying offensive things, Sam? You're not brave. You're outdated. Sam didn't move. He just looked up at her, calm, steady, his tone barely above a whisper. Funny, he said. Outdated ideas don't scare people this much. That stopped her for half a second, but then she fired back, louder now. You mistake shock for wisdom. People aren't scared of you. They're tired of you. Sam leaned forward, his eyes locked on hers. If they were tired, they'd stop talking about me, he said. Then he rose, slow, deliberate, like he'd done it 1,000 times before. The room went silent except for the hum of the studio lights. You call it progress, he said, his voice filling the space. I call it panic with better lighting. The audience gasped, some clapping, some booing. Joy's face flushed red. You sound like every man who can't stand not being the center of the story anymore, she snapped. Sam tilted his head slightly. And you sound like every critic who confuses noise for change. The words hit hard. Joy froze, then laughed, sharp and bitter. You really think anyone's afraid of your opinions? Sam shrugged. You are, he said softly. Otherwise, you wouldn't be yelling. That was it, the breaking point. Joy turned toward the producers, waving her hand toward the stage crew. I'm not continuing this. Get him off my set. The crowd erupted, half in protest, half in disbelief. Whoopi called out, Joy, come on, let's just... But Joy wouldn't hear it. He's done. He's disrespectful, and I'm not sitting here while he lectures us on decency. Sam didn't move. He stayed standing, shoulders square, calm as stone. There it is, he said quietly. The new Hollywood, tolerance that ends the moment you start talking. 2 security guards started down the aisle. Sam didn't flinch. He just stared at Joy, steady and unshaken. This isn't a show anymore, Joy, he said, his voice low but carrying across the room. It's a warning. The audience went still. Even the camera operator stopped moving. It wasn't just another heated moment. It was something heavier, something raw. Sam took a slow step toward the exit, his mic still clipped to his jacket. The tension hung in the room like smoke after a gunfight. Everyone could feel the ending coming, but no one knew what form it would take. Joy folded her arms and muttered just loud enough for the microphones to catch it. Actions have consequences, she said, her voice dripping with self-righteous control. Sam stopped mid-step. The sound of his boots against the floor echoed. He turned back toward her, his voice dropping to that deep, gravelly rumble that made every word feel carved in stone. "You're right," he said quietly. "And yours just had one." Joy blinked, caught off guard. "Excuse me?" He faced her fully now, shoulders squared, eyes locked. "You called for respect," he said. "But what you really want is obedience. That's not strength, Joy. That's fear. Wearing a microphone." The audience froze. You could almost hear the heartbeat of the studio itself. Even the crew in the back stopped moving. Joy tried to recover, opening her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. Sam kept going, calm and deliberate. "You don't debate, you dictate. You don't listen, you label. And the second someone refuses to kneel, you call it hate. That's not conversation. That's control." The words hit like thunder. Joy's hand trembled slightly on the table, but she held her chin high. "You think walking away makes you right?" she asked weakly. Sam gave a faint smile. Sad, almost pitying. "No," he said. "It just means I've said enough." He buttoned his jacket, slow and measured, the sound of the fabric clicking under the lapel cutting through the silence. "You can cancel guests, Joy," he said, his voice steady, "but you can't cancel reality." The audience exploded, some clapping, others shouting, the noise rolling through the studio like a storm. Sam nodded once toward Whoopi, who gave him a small, knowing look. "Thanks for having me," he said simply, and then he turned to walk. He didn't rush. He didn't grandstand. Just that calm stride, the same way he entered, the same way he left, unbothered. As the applause thundered, the cameras caught Joy still standing at the table, lips parted, eyes darting between the floor and the lens. She looked less like the host in control and more like someone suddenly realizing the air had turned against her. The network's cue light blinked red, signaling for a cut, but the camera didn't move. It held on her face, on the silence, on the weight of what she'd just been told. Joy Behar stood frozen, cornered not by force but by truth. What just happened on The View wasn't an interview. It was a reckoning. Sam Elliott didn't raise his voice, didn't throw a punch, but his words hit harder than any headline ever could. One man, one truth, and a studio that couldn't handle either. Do you think Sam was out of line? Or just saying what no one else dared to? Tell us in the comments what side you're on. And don't forget to hit subscribe for more stories that Hollywood wishes you'd ignore.